most of those troops out there were Italians. You had to feel sorry for the Germans of having an ally like the Italians. Man, they weren't much for fighting, man. When things got a little hot, they were out of there. And when they were going to surrender en masse there, they'd come out of them hills and them olive groves, and they were carrying suitcases, like they had been on vacation. Yeah, civilian suitcases, they were unbelievable.
Cat-F. Welcome to World War II Live. I am your host, Dr. John C. McManus, and of course that was Donald Evans from the 66th Armored Regiment, 2nd Armored Division, who fought in the Battle of Sicily, and talking a little bit about, going up against Italian opposition, a little bit about what that would have been like that summer, dealing with this kind of mixed resistance situation. So our scope today will be a little bit about like the post-D-Day aspect of the Battle of Sicily, what happens once we're ashore, and of course alongside to jabber about that is my good buddy Kevin Hymel. How are you?
John, I am the Snickle Fritz to your equipoise.
Oh, that one's like highbrow. I mean,
So that's a real test of your World War II movie knowledge. Do you know the movie?
The equipoise?
Snickle Fritz and Equipoise. Who were they?
Sounds submarine-ish, but
oh, no. John. So disappointed. Stalag 17. They were the two mice that they raced. John!
Well, it's been a good probably 40 years since I've seen that movie, so...
Time to revisit. Great movie.
It is. Actually, it is. Yeah. Or seen pieces of it, but yeah, that's right. It comes back. And of course, alongside is always spinning the dials is our chief of staff, our incredibly intelligent Emmy-winning producer who, I'm saying that in spite of the fact that he's wearing Boston Red Sox garb, but
I thought he was a Yankees fan. I thought you were a Yankees guy.
We might turn him into...
Sorry, this is the end of this podcast. I cannot participate in this any longer.
I mean, all that Red Sox stuff, you got to question his judgment on many levels. But we look past these things, and it is...
Wasn't Carl Yastrzemski kind of overrated, Mark? Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, come on! Oh, my God. My Polish mother would kick your butt, she heard you say that. What abuse!
He was and is a god. His grandson's pretty good too.
Hey, come on. We cover World War II. We cover some brutal stuff. We can make fun of sports teams.
Like Ted Williams, fighter ace from World War II, also a Boston Red Sox fan. So yeah.
I got him in my freezer right now. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Ted Williams was amazing. Right. He was truly amazing.
And he still is. He's still with us, man.
Oh,
he's kind of giving me the cold shoulder, but yeah, he's still with us.
Oh my God. All right. Sicily, right? Are we actually talking about Sicily tonight?
I guess we are. I mean, I'm a little off track with this nutball that I have to co-host with. But
so about Bucky Dent.
Oh no. Well, we just recorded this. We're recording on July 28th. July 24th is actually a day we celebrate in my house. That was the day in 2004 where Red Sox catcher Jason Varitek got into a fight with A-Rod and put a glove in his face. And everyone says that's the moment where the Red Sox turned it around and won the World Series.
Hey! When everyone was a Red Sox fan.
That's right.
In retrospect, that was a big deal for them. It really was. That was a seminal moment for that team.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody deserved to get a glove to the face, it's Alex Rodriguez.
So speaking of glove to the face, we've got the American forces ashore in Sicily. The British have landed to the east in a place called Syracuse. And although the landing is successful, there's going to be a little tragedy on the horizon here. And so, John, you were saying in the last episode how we just didn't have enough transport aircraft to get all of the paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne, more specifically an entire regiment, to drop. And so they're going to come in with a following night drop. Now, this is the 504th under, I think it's Colonel Tucker. Is that, yeah. And unfortunately for them, they're going to come in right at dusk, and the Luftwaffe is wrapping up a raid on the United States fleet. And so tempers are high, fingers are itchy on trigger fingers, and a lot of these transports fly over the fleet just fine. And according to my research, it's when they get over the ground that a soldier with the 45th Infantry Division, a green division, opens fire with a machine gun, and the Navy then adds to that. They shoot down a number of transports. I think they kill a little bit more than 80 paratroopers.
Yeah, I think 89.
And it is... Say what, John?
About 89, I think. And, yeah.
89? But it is an unmitigated disaster. It is a huge... and really, to my knowledge, the first major friendly fire incident for the United States Army in World War II. And when Eisenhower finds out about this, he goes ballistic, and he goes out to Patton's ship. Patton hasn't landed yet, or maybe no, he hadn't landed yet, and he just basically chews Patton out. And he says, "I want you to launch an investigation. We're going to find out who did this." And Patton says, "Yes, sir." And he like scribbles in the diary. He goes, "This is probably going to be my fault," And what Eisenhower didn't understand to calculate was what we know very well now: the fog of war. And that the elements that you cannot control. John, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. When they do the investigation, they figure there's so many sources of this that you really can't finger the blame on one person or entity or unit. I mean, really, it's under dispute whether the 45th opened fire first or the Navy, even to this day. And this wasn't like something that came in out of the blue, because all the relevant commanders had taken steps to try and prevent just this thing from happening. I mean, General Ridgeway, the commander of the 82nd Airborne Division, certainly General Patton, the naval commanders, the aerial commanders, everybody had tried, but it was just sort of a bad circumstance, like you said. There had been that German attack right before this aerial armada comes over, and there had been German attacks on and off all day too. So crews are tired. Even the commanders were on the ground. I know Ridgeway was on the ground even with the anti-aircraft crew saying, "Hey, they're coming over, don't open fire." So they were trying to intervene even before it happened. So nobody was really 100% at fault. But it's
John, I was going to say, like, have you heard that term? Because every time I read about this, I come across it where it's always like 2% never gets the message.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly, and so that's what they're trying to do, make sure that everybody's going to get the message, and that's almost impossible to do. So they find out that it's just probably not a good idea to send your aircraft over a naval corridor, regardless of what's going on, and at night, especially when who knows what can happen in terms of aircraft recognition. So this is about 2/3 of Tucker's 504th that's coming in. They lose over 20 aircraft. So it's just, like you said, an unmitigated disaster. It really hurts like the second and third wave more so than the first. The first, most of them get down and reasonably in the drop zones. But I've argued that it's the byproduct. Really, it begins, in my opinion, with Eisenhower's decision not to share the information that there are 2 German divisions on Sicily. And the reason I say that is because you've already had this German counterattack in the course of the day. There's a sense that we can't get the 504th in by ship, and that we need them there immediately, right there, and to drop them basically on top of the Axis attack, which is not necessarily the best way to go into combat, and not really the situation at that point in time either. The other thing, so the 82nd Airborne Division at this point just has 2 parachute infantry regiments, and then the glider regiment. We don't have enough aircraft to get them in at this stage either. So that's a factor as well. It's really just a tragedy all the way around.
Well, I'll tell you that I guess if you're going to pull one positive out of this, is the Allied commanders do take lessons learned from it. So when you have D-Day, they're painting those stripes, those D-Day stripes or victory stripes, black and white on the aircraft. They come in at midnight, where the fleet is going to be landing at 6 a.m. or 6:30 a.m. And if you see those maps of the flight plans, they do not fly over the Navy. They go over the English Channel and come in by the sides. And I think all of that are lessons learned by the disastrous Sicilian drop.
For sure. And even in nearer term, the lessons learned when they drop in at least 2 battalions at Salerno. Because of course we've got naval forces deployed offshore at Salerno too. They learn, like you said, they learn those same lessons to have an air corridor in a different place and to bring them in. And of course, coordination is better and communication too.
Right.
And Anzio too is another example. We're not necessarily doing an airborne drop, but also there's a lot of friendly aircraft over that beachhead. So all these lessons do add up. And the invasion stripes is the classic example, I think, by Normandy.
Yeah. And John, why didn't Ridgeway parachute in with the troops? I mean, it's documented, because now that we talk about it, I'm remembering Patton, he does go ashore, goes back to the USS Augusta, and then comes in the next day. And I know one of those times he comes in with Ridgeway, and Ridgeway just basically wanders onto the battlefield looking for his airborne troops. Why didn't he jump?
Yeah, so he really considered jumping, but he thought that he would be in a better position to coordinate his entire division, particularly the landing of the 325th in the aftermath of the 505th, Colonel Gavin's 505th that comes in first. He felt that he'd be in the best position to coordinate everything he had by coming in by sea in that invasion. And, of course, a lot of the hardcore paratroopers don't agree with that. They think only real paratroopers jump and all this kind of stuff. But actually, it was a good call on Ridgeway's part, because let's imagine he jumps with the 505th the first night. We all know how scattered those landings are. He could have been just competent and effective somewhere in Sicily, or he could have been coming into this friendly fire disaster the next night, too. It works out really well. And, of course, Normandy does the opposite. He decides to jump there, and that works out very well for him, in part because he goes in with the 505th, which has the most true landings of any airborne unit in Normandy. But yeah, a lot of the hardcore paratroopers always held that against Ridgeway, which I think is personally kind of silly, but that's how they viewed things.
Soldiers.
Yeah, yep.
And I'm going to ask you one more question before we kind of move on to the regular infantry combat. What was his, what do I want to say, reunion with Jim Gavin? Like, Jim Gavin is the head of the 505th. He goes in there, everything's scattered, but he gets a fighting. Tell me about when they got together. Was it a big hug, or was he like, hey, you've screwed all this up?
No, it's neither, actually. So Ridgeway has, really interestingly, he has two fascinating reunions once he gets ashore. Like you said, he's just kind of wanders ashore, and at first he can't find any of his troopers. He's going to the front lines of the 1st Infantry Division, and he's like, where are my paratroopers? Like, we don't know. We haven't seen them. And then eventually you find the first guy he comes across is a captain with a broken ankle, I think. And by the way, this is so weird. In Normandy, when Ridgeway dropped there, who's the first soldier he encountered? The same guy who he had encountered in Sicily.
I thought you were going to say a guy with a broken ankle. I'm like, well, isn't that the odds good on that? But oh my God, the same guy?
The same guy, and the second time the guy had like a broken back or something, and Ridgeway was like, boy, I'll bet you're going to be glad never to see me again. That was his sense of humor. But
that's freaking awesome.
He comes ashore, he starts to find a lot of his people. And one of the first people he encounters is Ted Roosevelt Jr., of course, the assistant division commander, the Big Red One. And they knew each other very well because Ridgeway had worked for Roosevelt when he was the governor general in the Philippines in the early 30s. So he has this warm, very, insult-laden reunion with him. He didn't have that kind of relationship with Gavin yet. They were certainly kindred spirits, but it's more of like a mentor and protege kind of relationship. So it's actually a couple days later that Ridgeway and Gavin finally do meet up, and Gavin's seen a heck of a lot of fighting by that time. To Biazzo Ridge and other places. He's been scatter-dropped and whatever. When they do meet up, it's the warmth of, like, I'm so glad you're alive. and now we can coordinate, and now we can actually be in touch. And Gavin, like, oh, there's so much I need from you. And Ridgeway, like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot I need from you. It's more like that kind of thing. And then they do coordinate really pretty well at that point.
I'm going to jump in here. That reminded me, when you talk about that reunion, there was a general that goes ashore, behind the lines of the 1st Infantry Division, General Wiedemeyer. And he's actually serving as the eyes and ears of George C. Marshall, the Chief of Staff. And when he comes up the beach at Jella, he sees Teddy Roosevelt Jr. And Roosevelt's in there in the thick of the action, but suddenly an enemy artillery barrage explodes and destroys a bunch of ducks, those amphibious 2.5-ton trucks. And Wiedemeyer holds that against him. He's like, oh, he should have gotten those things under cover. He might have personal courage, but not leadership courage. And he's later going to use that against Roosevelt to get him out of Sicily. And it's just, to me, that unfairness of the guy who is in the front lines fighting the battle, and somebody sees him who's not as experienced and sees something they don't like and makes a bad call, in my opinion.
And with all due respect to Wiedemeyer, he knew about as much about combat as he knew about Donald Duck. This guy, Wiedemeyer, was a brilliant strategist and a major military thinker and planner and whatnot, and a really good diplomat. But in terms of frontline combat and infantry, he's a Courtney Massengale. He's not a Sam Damon.
I hate to disagree with you, John, but I'm not going to tolerate you bad-mouthing Donald Duck. Because I think he was an expert in amphibious warfare, but I'm sorry, go on.
I mean, Donald Duck may have known amphib, but I don't know he knew frontline combat. But
okay, I'll give you that.
Wiedemeyer is so out of his depth in that situation, in my view. All due respect to the man, because I respect him and think he had a pretty amazing record. But for him to accuse Ted Roosevelt Jr. of not knowing about combat leadership at the front is pretty rich, you know. So. And then Wiedemeyer gets that sort of temporary command of a battalion or something on Sicily. Yeah, that's so odd to me. But so he gets a little frontline duty. But later on, he said, "This was the only time I wore my war regalia." You know, and I'm like, nobody said war regalia. You know? Come on, dude.
Did he have his baton and marching shoes and stuff?
Drawing room kind of soldier, you know. And all due respect. Great, but I mean, I know what you're saying about his criticism of Ted Roosevelt Jr., and I think it was unfair. I
agree. I agree. So we got everybody ashore. We've got Truscott with the 3rd Infantry. We got Terry Allen with the 1st, Troy Middleton with the 45th, and the 82nd Airborne. Now, Omar Bradley is going to be in command, I believe, of those 3 infantry divisions, and if not just the 1st and the 45th, because Patton, now that he has an army, he's going to create a new corps to go with 2nd, which is called the Provisional Corps, and that is going to be basically the 82nd and elements of the 9th Infantry and elements of the 2nd Armored, because the 2nd Armored is not going to come ashore in full impact. And as they start moving up the spine, or heading north in Sicily, we talked about that the other day, how Patton got permission to go to the port at Agrigento. The terrain, John, I don't know that we didn't, I don't feel we gave it enough justification, because Patton is like, this is going to be a tank war. We're going to show what the American Army is made to do and can do. And it's really a job of the infantry with mules to make this thing even possible. And and the 3rd Infantry gets a lot of credit, but I think the 45th, and especially as a green unit, and the 1st did a pretty good job, but they didn't have the Truscott Trot. And John, what the heck is that?
So Lucian Truscott, the commander of the 3rd Infantry Division, had really trained these guys up very hard. He had done unforgiving physical kind of training in North Africa. These guys were in tip-top physical condition. They knew their weapons. They knew their coordination. They knew their communication. All of that kind of stuff. So he had really turned the 3rd ID into a superb light infantry formation that is ideal for this mission, because the terrain, like you said, is so challenging. It's tough for armor and other vehicles. So the division has this, they take Agrigento.
Right.
Okay, so that's on the southern coast, and then they pivot from there, like due north, and they go straight across the island. And it's not exactly like a shoot 'em up the whole time or whatever, but there's danger. I mean, there's concern. Yeah. But it's the whole social situation that we had talked about in our previous episode of being greeted as liberators or whatever, but also a kind of tense undercurrent of fascist resistance and some Germans here and there, and just not necessarily knowing exactly where to go next. So it's very, very hot. There's not that much water. And in fact, it's funny you mentioned mules. Truscott comes across some of the soldiers in his division who were riding mules, and he gave orders. He said, "Get the men off the mules. They're infantrymen. They're not mule riders or mule."
They're not saddlebags.
Yeah, he didn't like that, so he wanted them dismounted. He wanted them on foot, and they were. And the Truscott Trot basically meant you were keeping up that pace of like 4 to 6 mile per hour kind of walking, which may not sound like much, but it actually is, especially when you're wearing those brogan boots that they had at that time, those horrible leggings.
And the terrain is...
And the terrain is up and down, and you're carrying probably 40 to 60 pounds of stuff, and it's 90-something degrees, so... that adds up. You got to be 20 years old, and a lot of these guys really were.
Or younger, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, John, I thought I heard, like, the Truscott Trot was like, you march for 1 mile and rest for 5 minutes. Like, there was some sort of calculus, or is that...
Okay. Oh, yeah, they do that. They do that, but I think really in practice, when you're looking at these units and how urgent their timetable was and how badly these guys wanted to get to Palermo, they're just keeping on. I mean, they're not bothering to rest. In training, they were. But I think in practice... The 3 regiments of the division, which I would argue are 3 of the finest infantry regiments we have in the entire U.S. Armed Forces. The 15th, this guy named Audie Murphy is part of that unit, by the way. The 30th Infantry, and of course the greatest regiment of all time, the 7th. We all know that. But
bias,
bias alert. So I mean, but these guys are really paying off all that training, and then Truscott's really just straight ahead kind of leadership. I mean. He is really good, and we can see it at this point. And so they are approaching Palermo quicker, I think, than anybody had ever expected.
Yep. John, I'm going to interject real quick because I was thinking about that veteran at the beginning of the show. And so I actually interviewed a guy named Irving Bromberg. I think that was his name. Yeah, Irving Bromberg. He was a tanker with 2nd Armored. And he was basically, and we're going to get into this in the next episode, everything Patton was angry about in Sicily. Because his landing craft got hit on the way in, and him and a buddy just took up residence in a house. And whenever army trucks drove by, they'd run behind them, and the GIs would throw out C rations and K rations. And they basically took a break from war. And they said finally, like, jeeps and trucks would come down with loudspeakers. They'd say, get back with your unit, and you won't be punished. But if you don't, you will be court-martialed. And so he rejoins his unit. And he said the Italians, when they would come to a roadblock, and the Italians would have these like cannons pointing down the road, they would surrender and then say, "Oh yeah, the Germans are about a mile down that way, and they've got an 88 and a like not only did they surrender, but they were giving up their German brethren, making things relatively easier, I would say, for the infantry. And just to give the image, 3rd Infantry is heading north, and I think in between them now, because of that switcheroo that happened, we talked about last episode, the 45th Division is going to be on their right flank, and then you've got the 1st Infantry Division kind of going into the heart of Sicily. And one other thing I wanted to mention, so we talked about Patton, getting to Agrigento and kind of like playing a little stealthy there, saying, oh, it's a reconnaissance in force, and then they're able to take it and get their own port. Well, at one point, the Germans counterattack on Montgomery, and he says, hey, I need help from Patton. Now, if you've seen the movie, there's that great scene where Patton says, this got garbled in translation, send it back, and it'll take 24 hours. That never happened. Hap Gay, Patton's chief of staff, pocketed that notice. And it wasn't just like, hey, maneuver your forces. It was like, hey, I'm being attacked here. I need your help. And Gay was like, they can figure it out themselves. And so it was really a sleight of hand by Gay that enables that drive to continue to Palermo, which turns out to be a very unfair thing for the 3rd ID. Or maybe, John, you disagree.
Well, Patton wanted the 2nd Armored to go in there and grab it. That was his old division, right? And he wanted armor.
I don't know anything about this. This is the first time I've heard about this.
News to you, I know. But a funny thing happened on the way to this little choreographed Palermo thing. The 3rd ID was moving faster than anybody and really got there first. And the 7th Infantry Regiment, actually, the 3rd ID. So they encounter Hap Gay, who's not so happy about this because he knows his boss isn't going to be too happy. And, you know what they say.
Kevin's really smart?
Do you want
there you go.
No one ever says that. Come on, you shouldn't have guessed that.
now I failed the movie quiz, but to be specific about it, Patton basically takes a map of northern Sicily and draws a blue line basically arcing around Palermo and says, 3rd ID, you stop here. 2nd Armored's got this. And the 2nd Armored really hadn't done, I hate to badmouth my guys here, but they really hadn't done that much. It really was an infantryman's war. And I came across an interview, a 3rd ID guy goes into the hospital in Europe later in the war, and he's talking to the doctors, and he says, we had been doing all the sweating and bleeding and dying on the way to Palermo, and we knew in Palermo was the good food, the good booze, and the good women.
Exactly.
And they're telling us we can't go in there. I mean, when you put it down to that level, you're like, oh my God, that is incredibly unfair.
It is.
Yeah.
And we'd all feel that way, wouldn't we? So we could all relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
Sweat and dirt, and you probably lost some buddies by now, and somebody's going to tell you to stop, and you're not going to get into Palermo where there could be some enjoyable times ahead. Well, the heck with that. And infantry, as we all know, hates the rest of the world anyway, and is convinced that everybody's against them, and always has a chip on the shoulder, and so they're just like, and they're like, the heck with this. And of course, then it really kind of creates this culture where infantry units didn't always like Patton that much, and armor tended to, or I mean, that's at least certainly what happens with the 1st Division. But so Palermo is a good get though, because it's certainly an important port city. It's a good pivot point, and it's a place to really unwind and have a good time, provided it's not going to be off limits to you with the MP saying sorry, you can't go in there. So we've always got that, regardless of anything else. But one thing that I've always thought about this Sicily campaign. I mean, these are really good units that are involved. They're going to have a big play in this war. So, I mean, this isn't like the 2nd Armored's greatest moment, but that's going to be an incredible armor division in this war.
Yeah.
And then the 9th Division, I mean, that's an amazing unit. The 1st, the 3rd, the 45th is going to have a remarkable record. On and on, 82nd.
82nd, yeah.
Goes.
And John, it's a shame Patton is so driven to portray this as an armor victory. And he writes in his diaries and his letters how this is going to be taught at West Point as how to use armor. And it's a shame that he couldn't say, that with the rough terrain, our infantry did an amazing job and wiped the Germans out on the western side of Sicily, because that's really what happens. In fact, there's one area, the 9th Infantry Division is really kind of at this time on the far west of the line, and there's only elements of it. And Patton rolls up, and there's a lieutenant there, and he's got some POWs, checking for mines and stuff. And the lieutenant's like, sir, this is a really hot area. I don't think this is a good place for you to be. And he goes, well, the armor's going to drive through and take the day. And he's like, bruh. And so the tanks start to roll up and cross the line of departure, and all this artillery starts falling on him, stops him cold. Patton has to jump into a foxhole, and he just says, carry on, and drives off. So he tried, but it was really his infantry that's going to win the day. And John, does the mayor of Palermo, I always get my Messinas and Palermos mixed up, does the mayor surrender to Truscott, or does he surrender to, I'm trying to think, who's the provisional corps commander at this time? It's not Bradley, it's Jeffrey Keyes. Jeffrey Keyes is Patton's chief of staff, and he says, hey, you're in charge of this provisional corps. And I want to say that the official surrender goes to him, or am I wrong about that?
I think it does. That's my understanding too, but I couldn't swear to it. But it's really quite amazing. And the biggest issue we had, we're running out of time for this, but just to close the thought, the biggest issue we have during this move to Palermo and then eventually to clear out the western part of the island is sometimes keeping the soldiers from going into the fields and take melons and olives and all these things that are available to eat, some fresh food, on Sicily. That kind of drives the farmers nuts, but it also leads to the diminution of some of our combat power because guys are off doing whatever. So the generals had to really instill some pretty serious discipline, and I think that's why Truscott is quite successful in doing that, initially. But going forward, it's harder and harder, obviously.
It's funny. It was a problem for Sherman's army. It was a problem for Patton's army.
Yep. And it's a problem for everybody's army, right? It's just the way it works. But.
So we've got Palermo. The American army has split the island in half. Patton was given a secondary role, and he's kind of taken the ball and run with it. And this is a huge, really, for the American people at home, this is a huge victory. Yeah. The sting of Kasserine passed, even though it was covered up. People knew something wasn't right. The victory in North Africa is an Allied victory, but the capture of Palermo, that's an American victory.
Sure is.
And it's not a victory for chumps, John.
Oh no,
that would be us. Yeah, that would be us. We really are.
There's the real soldiers back then, and there's the chumps now. That's us.
John, Mark, read us the questions while I drink some ice water.
All right. So first of all, John, before we start, tell our audience how they can send us questions.
Yes, so the way to send us questions is at our email address, which is worldwar2live@gmail.com, worldwar2live@gmail.com, and of course it's the numeral 2.
Right. Keep those questions coming. Okay.
Yep. So, now, Mark, before you do anything, I'm going to mention our friends at WW2 History Magazine. They're one of our favorite sponsors, only sponsor. And if you're interested in getting WW2 History Magazine, which I highly recommend because I've written for them and done research for them for decades, and it's a magazine that really kind of brings combat alive. They've got departments like personalities and weapons and intrigue, and then feature stories covering large battles and even the lesser-known battles. So if you're interested in getting a subscription, we recommend you call 1-800-219-1187 or go to www.historymagazine.com. That's www, Roman numeral 2, historymagazine.com. Check it out. Okay, Mark, I give it to you.
All right, chumps are ready. Here we go. So we're going to talk a little bit about equipment this time because you guys, the last episode, you kind of got stumped on that whole M18 question. I can't believe you didn't know that. Oh my God, I used to respect you guys.
So you're going to cut us some slack by giving us more technical questions. Yeah. Thank you, Mark.
I love it. Appreciate that. Take that, opening up these old, Yankees wounds.
He's going to get us back. Yeah.
So the first one is from Bradley. And his question, I think, actually relates to the veteran we started the show with because Don Evans was actually in a recon unit in the 2nd Armored Division. He talked about being in recon. Anyway, so Bradley wants to know, what is your assessment of the contribution of United States mechanized cavalry in World War II? Lots of uncertainty regarding organization, equipment, and doctrine before and during World War II. In 1942. In the end, did they have any real impact in Western Europe? He's talking about mechanized cavalry.
I'm going to say yes, and just to give context, in an army, you've got 2 corps, 3 corps, and a number of divisions. Each corps is assigned a cavalry group. Now, I think when people think of cavalry, they think of a smaller unit out in front of the infantry or something like that. And those are, cavalry regiments, which we did have, but cavalry groups were the big element that they mechanized. They tried keeping the horses in the game as long as they could. They came up with ways to transport the horses to the battlefield and whatnot. But the real job of these cavalry groups was to check out what the enemy was doing and get the heck out of there and report back. I think they were very successful in that. And then as the war goes on, and really, especially in Europe, becomes a war of movement, they really do kind of prove their worth. I mean, they're not perfect. They can race ahead faster than the infantry at times and capture a bridge, but not be strong enough to hold the bridge. In 1945, as Patton's kind of racing across Germany, getting to the Rhine and beyond the Rhine, he's at times actually critical of his infantry division commanders, saying, "Oh, look, Polk's infantry took that town you're supposed to take." They had become so mobile. So I think they were an asset. They kind of had to learn on the job, and they're always commanded by a young colonel from everything I've seen. But I've been impressed with everything I've read, and I think they're sort of forgotten on the battlefield a lot of times by historians. John? Including me, I should be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I'd concur. I mean, I think they're definitely an asset. I think they definitely do the mission that's assigned to them in terms of reconnaissance and scouting. Generally, our reconnaissance and scouting is pretty good in World War II in Europe. In the armored divisions, a lot of that job would have gone to the light tanks. So that meant usually like a Stuart tank or maybe even armored cars. And I don't know what you guys think, but I think it takes a lot of guts to get in one of those little cans that's going to be so incredibly vulnerable to German or Italian anti-tank fire, much less the enemy tanks, and to be out there roaming around basically in no man's land or in whatever main supply route we need or route of advance, whatever it's going to be. And your job really is to avoid combat, but that's a lot easier said than done. I think later in the war, there's some really good coordination with close air support that helps provide them some level of protection, and artillery too. So it depends which kind of cavalry mission or recon scouting mission we're talking about. In the armored division, obviously, it's more light tanks and armored cars and whatnot. In an infantry division, it may be dismounted people or in jeeps. Like with a 50 cal, something like that, a pretty quick vehicle, but also it could be very, very vulnerable. But that's, the value of it is that you can maneuver pretty much anywhere, and a lot of times on foot as well. So in the infantry divisions, it usually is like a cavalry recon troop that's a division asset is going to be used that way. And a lot of times it tends to be alongside the G2 section, the intel section, because obviously that's a natural partner for them to gather information. So I think it took a hell of a lot of guts to serve in that job, and I think largely they function pretty well.
John, I'll let you go in a second, Mark. The scout cars I think we use are pretty cool too. The six-wheeled scout cars, what do they have, like a 37, 32 millimeter pea shooter on top,
37.
But they're very rugged and can get in and out quickly. When I think of the criticism, and John, you know about this as well as I do, that a lot of the criticism falls on a certain cavalry group. I think it was the 114th that was right next to the 99th Infantry Division up on the line when the Germans attacked at the Battle of the Bulge, the Ardennes offensive. And I know there's been a lot of criticism of the 114th commander pulling out, kind of exposing the 99th flank. I don't know enough about it to say, well, here's why. But really, those cavalry units are not designed for defense positions and things like that. And so maybe it was the commanders and his decisions, but I don't know, John, where do you stand on the 114th there?
Yeah, I think if they get criticism, it's kind of unfair. They're basically a screening force, and so they're when the enemy comes in force, they're designed to get out of there, and that's what they're supposed to do, and that's how they're trained up, and that's their doctrine on a lot of levels. And they don't know that this is the beginning of a mass German offensive and all that, and that they're hanging the 99th Division's flank out there, and even then, the 99th performed pretty darn well alongside the 2nd that comes into play, and so. No, I think I've always thought that criticism is a little bit unfair, and given who they are and what they're armed with and what their mission is, yes, I guess they could have fallen on their swords. But no, again, to answer the question, I do think these forces overall in the war against Germany were pretty effective.
Yeah. Okay, ace that one. Booyah!
Very good. Yeah, I just want to hit a little bit more. Bradley did want to know a little more about equipment. So you mentioned the 8-wheeled armored car. So that's like the Greyhound with the 37. Right. The and then they had what was like the M8 or M20, which was the turretless version of that. And is that mainly what they have in Jeeps and things like that? They don't have like Stewarts or anything else, right?
No.
In an armored division, they have Stewarts. So you would have so like in an armored division, let's say you've got an armored battalion. Your A, B, and C companies are armed with whatever is the major main battle tank. Probably the M4 Sherman with the 75. Your D company is almost always the recon element armed with Stewarts. So a company of them would be, 17 tanks, Kevin, I think, something like that.
16, 17, yeah.
Yeah, so it's basically, first lieutenant or a captain, and that's his equipment. Generally, in an armor division, it's those light tanks. In an infantry division, yes, it's going to be the Jeeps with maybe 50 cals mounted on them. But that's certainly a heck of a weapon, but not against enemy armor.
Yeah.
So you're hoping to avoid that. And the M8 Scout car could be anywhere. It could be in the armor division, could be in the M20, in the infantry division. It really just kind of depends. And I don't want to paint a picture of the Stuart never working with infantry divisions. They did. You would have a tank battalion attached to an infantry division, and one of those companies in that battalion would be your light tanks used in this function. So it just kind of depended, but in terms of the equipment, that's the vehicles, I should say. That's
Yeah.
pretty.
And Kevin, in the beginning, you talked about these cavalry groups, right, which are independent of armor or infantry divisions, right?
Correct. Yes.
And
so they answer to the corps commanders.
Right, and so again, that'd be like mainly a group of scout cars, kind of.
Scout cars and jeeps. Yeah. In fact, there was one group that took the bridge at Trier over the Moselle, way out in front of all the troops, and I want to say it was Task Force Fricket. Sometimes they give them some extra stuff, call them a task force, and the Germans just counterattack, push them right off the bridge.
Yeah.
They just couldn't hold on long enough. So yeah, So you have cavalry groups that answer to the corps. And then you have cavalry regiments and platoons, or what do we say, troops, that are more attached to divisions, either armor or infantry. Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Oh, A plus. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, goes without saying.
All right, here we go. Now we get a little more. Jeff wants to know, even though the Messerschmitt 163B Comet arrived late in the war and was plagued by performance issues, seeing rocket-powered jets screaming across the sky must have been extremely unnerving to Allied pilots, including the American P-51 and British Spitfire. Did the Allies worry that the Comet might shift the air war over Europe, or develop any countermeasures in response? And hypothetically, how might the air war have changed if the Comet had been perfected and deployed earlier by Germany?
Well, thank you, Jeff. That's an excellent question. I don't know that they were spooked by it, because it was more like, hey, what's that? Because the thing was actually so fast, and I think it only had like 4 minutes of fuel, or like 8 minutes of fuel. I mean, it was a very short period. So they basically would shoot up and then come down at supersonic speeds, make a firing pass, and land. It was incredibly deadly to the Comet pilots. I believe more pilots were killed than they shot down Americans. I think it was a desperation weapon. I think we were more concerned with the Me-262, the German jet. I have never seen the Comet mentioned by an Allied commander. I've seen it in books, and the Germans were experimenting and blah, blah, blah. I think it was a complete desperation weapon, but I don't think we were worried it was going to be a war changer, be a big difference maker. And would it have been that way if it came in earlier in the war? I don't know, maybe if they armed it with more rockets and got more life out of it, like if they could extend its fuel time. I don't know, John, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it's the one and done kind of weapon, it's not all that effective in terms of its ability to have a straight trajectory and attack, and in terms of a weapons platform. And yeah, it's more dangerous to the pilots than than our guys, and so. No, I've always perceived that there's a lot more concern about the 262, the Me-262. In terms of countermeasures, I don't know that they really had to worry enough about the Comet to have elaborate countermeasures. With the 262, the main countermeasure is to just shoot it down on runways or when it's taking off and landing.
Right.
When you actually maybe have an advantage and they're kind of vulnerable. But no, the Comet, I perceive it the same way as a desperation weapon. I agree 100%, and I don't know that it had all that much impact on the air war.
And John, with the Me-262, they had to cut off their engine in order to land, so it was really completely defenseless upon landing. Am I got that right, or?
Yeah, I think so. That's my understanding too. So that made it even more vulnerable when it's landing, because it couldn't maneuver, it couldn't come back from that.
Yeah,
and I could be wrong, but I think that's when the majority of them are shot down, or just playing on the ground, obviously.
I think you're right. And also, the defense against the Comet, it's like, wait it out. It's going to do one strike on you for about 5 seconds, and then it's over. And whether or not you can return fire, I don't know that they could lead it enough. Or I've just never heard accounts from pilots, or I've never read any to give a measurement. John, you wrote a whole book on the 8th Air Force and pilots. Did you come across anything on the Comet there?
On the combat airmen, so I was, really getting into even deeper than that, and all theaters and everything. But no, I didn't come across anybody who was particularly worried about the Comet or talked about it or had it front of mind. There were some people who worried about the ME-262, most definitely. So the way I would compare the Comet is it's sort of like the aerial version of a Panzerfaust, but not effective. So it's a kind of fire and forget sort of weapon.
Yeah.
And it really isn't that effective, unlike the Panzerfaust, which was a brilliant, very cost-effective weapon.
And John, do you think you didn't find any accounts simply because guys didn't encounter enough comets, or just was that poor research?
It's probably poor research, because as you know, I really make most of this up, so it's...
There you go. Yeah. I'm glad we got it out on the record.
Well, I'd say if anybody knows about poor research, I mean, all respect, it's you. I mean, it's absolutely...
Come on, let's get... Please, where it's due. Thank you very much.
High praise. I take it that way, yeah.
All right. I think that was a B++.
That wasn't bad. There's a comet here in the Smithsonian. Right? Udvar-Hazy?
Right? Yeah, Ugazi, however you pronounce that.
And you were very generous when you said they would land, because they didn't have wheels. They had wheels that when they would shoot off, and so they essentially would crash land, which is insane.
Hey, Steve Austin used to crash land a plane every episode of $6 Million Man, and look at him.
He got out of that thing.
If you're listening and you're under 55 years old, you can get that reference.
Yeah, but they'll get Snicklefritz and Equipoise. Okay, is that two? We got a third?
We got a third.
Yeah, we have a third.
Okay.
Just rocket propelled planes in general in World War II. Right, the Japanese have the plane.
Keishian, I think.
Yeah, right. We nicknamed the Baka, and I'm sure they did a lot more damage than the Comet ever did, because they sank a couple destroyers.
Yep.
And did the Germans have a radio-controlled rocket bomb off of Italy?
Yes.
Salerno or something?
It wasn't very effective. They also used it off of Belgium. In fact, it almost looked like a plane on top of another plane.
Yeah,
it had some kind of scaffolding, and so it would separate, and the person in the bomber underneath would use the radio controls to have it attack, preferably a bomber or some other target, but very much infant stage. And I want to say, and I could be wrong, that in that they actually used a television screen to see where the thing was going, and that was the first use of an actual television screen in combat or anything big like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was the USS Savannah that got hit off of Anzio or something by that bomb.
If you say so.
Amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, I think
it was the Savannah. Yep.
So, desperation, I think it sounds right, and also we're seeing the first articulations of weapons that we would see today.
Which is pretty impressive for two inarticulate guys, but go on.
All right, last question from Matt. He says, Matt, how did German High Command view the defenses of Normandy compared to the Russian front in terms of allocation of high-quality German generals, divisions, weapons, equipment, etc.?
I would say Normandy and France are a very low priority until the early months of 1944. Most of the first team and most everything that is going to be difference making in terms of the manpower and all that is generally going to be thrown at the Eastern Front before that time. Then they really do get serious in those early months of 1944 with beefing up the coast. So this whole idea of an Atlantic Wall and all that, it's kind
propaganda.
It's German propaganda term that is still with us today. Yes, there's a lot of concrete bunkers and a lot of obstacles and weaponry, and I don't want to minimize their defenses by D-Day. I mean, certainly they've been beefed up and they're formidable, but there's no question that they've lost a lot of people and stuff on the Eastern Front that probably did weaken what they're going to be able to do in France.
Right. And you've got, I think, the majority of SS troops that were some of the best equipped troops. Those guys are over on the Soviet front. A lot of the construction was not complete on a lot of those areas on Omaha Beach, and a lot of them were not even manned. And even though they're beefing up the troops, they still have those Oos battalions of people with the eating disorders. They didn't send them back behind the lines. And as we know, a lot of the guys captured were, Asian guys from the Soviet Union that had surrendered. You're not going to tell me those guys are equal to the SS. What else can I pontificate about that? Yeah, the actual fighting is going on the Soviet front. And just by logic, that's where you got to put your best stuff. And you're right, John. As it becomes obvious the Allies are going to be attacking France in summer '44, they beef it up. But it's in so many ways a rush job compared to the steady reinforcement of the I guess you could say retreating or collapsing Soviet front.
And certainly they've got an equipment problem. And so for instance, like. Our troops are going to encounter Renault tanks, French-made tanks that they've captured, and they're going to fight against them. They're using Polish machine guns, captured Soviet guns. They're using a lot of captured weaponry, a lot of captured equipment. Again, I don't want to paint a portrait of that's exclusively it, but there's more of that than maybe they would have been comfortable of. And so there's an issue there in terms of weaponry and vehicles and whatnot. The other issue is manpower. And so they're using a lot of Eastern Europeans as roster fillers. Polish, Ukrainian, Russian, primarily, but people from Belarus as well. And they're basically presented with the option: we can work you as a slave laborer, or let you die as a POW, or you can serve in the German armed forces. What would you do?
Which one feeds you better, you think, John?
Yeah, I think it's the latter, and even that isn't all that great. But obviously you're under the supervision and auspices of the Germans then too. And are you really going to fight or not? Maybe you will, maybe you won't. And so that's a solid. I'm really generalizing here, but that's probably about a solid third or so of their manpower in Normandy, and that is of questionable value. And so it kind of makes you shudder to think how potent it could have been if they hadn't been diminished, not only on the Eastern Front, but in Italy, too. They lost a lot of good people and stuff in the Mediterranean and in North Africa, by the way. So a lot had happened by then that is going to soften them up, and that's one of the things that is necessary for this invasion to succeed.
John, what about the question about German leadership? I mean, we do have Rommel over there eventually. We do have von Rundstedt. We've got, who else?
You got Schweppenberg.
The names are...
Marx and Dolman, I think. You got
Who's our guy with the patch over his eye who takes over 7th Army? I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but some pretty solid leadership there. And I've always kind of felt that one of the reasons they put Rommel over there is, believe it or not, he's the Germans' most experienced amphibious commander, because he landed troops in North Africa, no assaulting any beach or anything, but, that's how poor the Germans are with amphibious knowledge, that Rommel's probably their best experienced guy.
And even then, he really doesn't understand much about it, because he wants to defend everything. He decides he's going to invest everything to defend at the waterline against an enemy that controls the sea and controls the air. And you're having to defend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles of coastline. So that, to me, tells me Rommel did not study what happened to the Americans in the Philippines in 1941 and 2 when MacArthur tried to do something of the same thing with nowhere near as many resources, of course. But it was an absolute unmitigated disaster. And so Rommel has to learn that lesson hard, because he wants his tanks close to the coast. And again, I wonder, okay, this guy's a field marshal, and apparently he didn't study what happened at Anzio, what happened at Salerno, what happened at Sicily to their armor, enough to get nailed by Allied naval gunnery. So if this is their best amphibious commander, then we're talking low-level minor leagues. Big-time ouchie.
Okay, Mark, how did we do on that? What was our grade?
That's a good. I'll give you a good one on that. That was. I like the save at the end with Rommel. That was a good one. That's all right. I think just to say, as someone who's, read a bunch about this, when you read your basic narrative of Normandy, you hear, right, First SS is there, Panzerlehr is there, Hohenstaufen is there, Hitlerjugend is there. It sounds like when you're hearing that they're all in, right? They've committed all the best stuff. But as you're saying, like, even those troops are still full of a lot of subpar kind of people.
Well, and those guys are going up against the British and Canadians.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Largely, but not exclusively, but largely. Because 2nd SS goes against us, and Panzerlehr, 17th SS Panzer Grenadier. But yeah, I mean...
Now, John, but those are on part of the Normandy campaign, not the actual D-Day, right?
D-Day.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Of course.
So
yeah, I mean, is there any SS Panzer unit that opposes the Allies on D-Day anywhere?
So
21st Panzers.
But that's not an
Steve
SS
Zaloga,
Right.
Yeah, Steve Zaloga famously said that the only Tiger tank the Americans destroy in the Normandy area was on a train that they hit, and that was the only Tiger tank that went up against the Americans. You know, it was on a train, so it's not exactly the Saving Private Ryan conclusion we like to imagine in our heads.
I thought he was going to say the only one we destroyed was in Saving Private Ryan, but I'm glad
no, that was 2.
got one on that train, so that's good. And let's hasten to add, this does not diminish the achievement of the Allied soldiers in carrying out what was a very, very difficult and chancy operation on some level. So we're not. So I want to make it clear, we're not really just denigrating them. We are trying to assess as fairly as we can what the Germans did have and what they didn't have, what their strengths and weaknesses were.
It's like that saying, John, what is it? A limited war is still a full war to the guy on the ground.
Absolutely.
This balance between the Soviets face and the European side, not to the guy coming up that beach.
Yeah, and what do I care if he's got a Polish machine gun if it fires? That can
the bullets don't translate. They translate just fine. Yeah.
And it took a lot of guts and courage and good planning and coordination and all those good things.
Yeah. But we should do an episode on that.
We absolutely should. I think there'd be some fodder
on D-Day. I think we can find some stuff on it.
I mean, maybe. It's not a well-known event, so we definitely need to delve into it.
All right, guys, what you up to? What are you up to?
Yeah, John, I'm gonna let you go first this time, John. What you reading? What you doing? What you knowing? What you up to? I ask in my Sergeant Schultz voice.
In your you know nothing. Well, we're getting ready to go in a few days down to New Orleans to the World War II Museum, actually to the End of War Symposium, which is going to be, I think, fascinating stuff. Obviously to commemorate VJ Day and the end of the war against Japan, and we're gonna talk that kind of stuff over. It's going to be neat.
Well, okay.
So
you're going to ask me? Thank you. Yeah. Well, first thing I'm going to do is check my email to see where my invite is to the World War II Museum in New Orleans. And then once I do that, so actually I came across something kind of weird in my research. Have either one of you guys heard of Doris Duke? She was like this rich heiress.
Tobacco family?
Yeah, and she becomes a reporter, for like Vanity Fair or something in World War II. So this weekend I went to the Library of Congress and I'm going through Patton's photo albums trying to figure out what I'm going to use for Volume 3. And the day that Patton met the Soviet commander that he gets drunk with and all this kind of stuff, in the photographs is Doris Duke. And he's like, oh, she crashed a party and whatnot. And I'm like, what is this? So her papers are at Duke University, so I've contacted them. There was a book that for some reason I couldn't get from the Library of Congress because I think my membership expired. But, so I went ahead and ordered the book, and it came, and it says this about when she meets Patton. She meets him, with the Soviet commander, so World War II has just ended. These are big parades and parties going on. Doris and Patton met by chance in Linz, Austria, 4 days after VE Day. He was more relaxed and happy than he had been in many months. When he learned that Doris was no longer on the OSS payroll, at least not directly, he told her she should do a story about him, which I cannot imagine Patton doing, honestly. Everybody wanted to do a story on him. Then the two of them went to his headquarters where they partied and made love. So, that author was said to be part of Doris Duke's staff. So I did a little research on him. He was actually a chef. And I don't know the ratio of chef to, research lessons and learnings. So I don't know if I buy this story. Hopefully I'll find more out when I hear back from the people at Duke. But that definitely caught my eye. I didn't see that one coming.
It does. Would this chef have been in a position to know something like that?
Supposedly she's had a lot of sensationalist stories come out about her that have been knocked down and stuff like that. I think someone said, hey, if you write a really salacious book about her, it'll sell better. I don't know this, but I don't know that he met the Soviet general in Linz, Austria. But it's really going to be about. I need to also find out what magazine she wrote for and see if I can find out, which I'm sure is right here. I think it's, like I said, I think it's Vanity Fair. But I'll look into it and see if there's an article that she wrote about Patton. But that's the first. I mean, he doesn't mention her in any diaries or letters with just that photo caption. So, this is why publishers hate authors. Because we hand in the manuscript and say, here you go, we're all done. Oh, I just found something.
One more thing. Oh, there's this. Well, the worst is
just
after you published, then you're really, we've had that experience many times.
Every time. Because when you publish, that's when people read your book and say, oh, my father has this letter from Patton, and you're like, damn it. So, but that's it for me, John. That's what I've been up to.
Well, that's good stuff. I mean, I think there was a movie about her too, if I'm not mistaken.
You're not talking about. I think you're thinking about Lee Miller.
No.
About Doris Duke?
Yeah, I mean, not about Lee Miller with Kate Winslet and all that. Yeah, I mean, I know that.
Right.
I think there was many, many years ago a movie about Doris Duke, and that's something that maybe another avenue to explore. I'm just going from foggy memory here, but yeah, she was really well known socialite and a lot of salacious coverage and all that kind of stuff. And I think I could be wrong, but I think they were like the leading tobacco family in the country, and so I kind of wonder. I mean, and obviously they had agreements with the government during World War II.
I guess I'll read the book and find out. Yeah,
cigarettes and all that, and so I kind of wonder if that's a subplot to the whole thing too. Whether she had connections, in the War Department or whatever. Just some thoughts. Yeah,
before we sign out, let's remind people about how to send us questions, because we can't get enough of those.
We love it. Yeah, so send us questions at worldwar2live@gmail.com. It's worldwar2live@gmail.com. And the 2 is, of course, the numeral 2. Not the Roman numeral, the Arabic. So,
there we go.
Thanks for joining us.
Arabic, fancy words, woo!
Yeah, I mean, that's just how I roll. Fancy, educated kind of stuff, yeah. So, thanks for joining us. It's been a blast talking Sicily and a lot of other stuff. So, hopefully you'll join us next time. All right, thanks so much. Roger out.